Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me once again at www.sonic-cinema.com as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. Again, you can, as always, you can check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Good Pod, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen to podcasts. Those are the main ones, especially since Google Podcasts is no more, but also you can check out the more on the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel, including quick takes of reviews. I've gotten several done over the past few weeks when it comes to potential Oscar nominees and current actual Oscar nominees. So that's kind of a good place to pick up as far as the listening to the podcast. You can also check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. There you will get early access to reviews, including for two of the movies that we're talking about today. We are, in addition, you can also get series such as Leaving the Collection and Life Soundtrack. And coming up, we will have Oscar nominated Nation discussions. That is at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. So today is going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to having this one. Once again, we are joined by a frequent guest, Phil Fasso. And this is a subject that he wanted to bring to the podcast. And I'm really glad that we're going to be getting into it. It is the life and work of Joseph Cotten, the terrific actor from Hollywood's golden age, best known for his collaborations with Orson Welles, but he also has a couple of other fantastic performances that we will be talking about. But for now, let's get started. And Phil, how are you doing today?
I couldn't be better, Brian. Thank you so much for asking. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's my new job is kind of keeps me on my toes as far as where I go, but I'm looking forward to being able to settle in on this conversation and looking forward to talking about three really fantastic films with you.
And it's kind of funny that you mentioned Oscars twice during your intro there, because Joseph Cotten, for all his fabulous talents, never won an Oscar.
And that is unfortunate because of the fact that he is such a fantastic talent. And I would argue there are at least a couple performances in this group of three that he should have at least been nominated for. He didn't even get a nomination for the Oscars, which just baffles my mind. But first,
I wonder, and again, this has always been my speculation about Cotten. I always thought that maybe people looked at him more as a product of Orson Welles than as an actor on his own. And I think that may have held him back in things like Oscars and those sorts of things, because really, I mean, if you look at the genesis, obviously, he lives in Florida, he's doing local theater, he's doing that sort of thing, and then he hooks up with Orson Welles, and Orson Welles' trajectory is just for the stars, and Cotton's along for the ride. But Cotton's not just along for the ride, he's really a massive contributor to Orson Welles and Orson Welles' success.
Mm-hmm.
So I always kind of wondered if the connection with Welles held Cotten back from Oscar nominations and those sort of things. If people saw him not just as Joseph Cotten actor, but Joseph Cotten actor as an offshoot of Orson Welles. And we're going to get to The Third Man, which Orson Welles did not direct. Orson Welles wrote one little piece for. Orson Welles is in the movie for, I think, less than 10 minutes. And people still talk about Orson Welles' speech in that movie more than anything else that Cotten did in that flick.
Yeah.
So even there, when Orson Welles isn't the mind behind everything, Cotton's still in his shadow. So, again, that's just food for thought. Those are just some of my ideas.
I definitely think that is I definitely think that is an excellent point because I mean, obviously, his breakout in terms of films was Citizen Kane as Jedediah Leland, who who basically kind of acted as Orson Welles' conscience in that movie, and then he was the star of the Magnificent Andersons, and like you said, the Third Man. He plays the main character, and we'll get to the Third Man. And he was also had an uncredited role I'm seeing in Othello as well as Touch of Evil. He played a coroner in Touch of Evil.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's something to that, but I mean, it's interesting because of the fact that I mean, he's somebody who very much has led movies in his career, but I wonder also if he's considered if part of the reason is also because of the fact that he's kind of considered a character actor whom people are just familiar with more in the background of movies and as part of ensembles as opposed to the larger part of all as a main force in the movie.
Which is also interesting that you mention that because I would say that he would probably qualify as a character actor, but the three roles we're going to look at today are three different performances.
Yeah.
You can't just mix and match. It's not like you're switching. Like a lot of character actors, you pull them out of one film and put them in another film. If you were to switch their roles in two films, you'd have the same performance. You'd have the same, basically, character, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that about these three films. The Cotten gives three very different performances here, each of which fits the movie like a glove. So
no, I absolutely agree with that. The first thing I was going to ask you before we really start to dive into discussing these films is what is it about Joseph Cotten that made you want to discuss him in terms of a larger discussion on his work?
I'll equate this to a modern actor whom I very much love. I will see anything that Patrick Wilson is in. I think Patrick Wilson is a solid actor. I think Patrick Wilson probably is never going to win an award for anything. But Patrick Wilson is always going to give a great performance. I'm always going to have fun watching him. He can act.
Yeah.
And I think much the same way about Joseph Cotten. Mm-hmm. I think Joseph Cotten, and I happened to watch around that time that I suggested this, I think that Third Man was on like TMC or one of those channels. And I happened to watch The Third Man. And I'm like, you know what? Brian and I have discussed several movies. We've discussed actors. You know, we just went through a whole thing with Dracula a few months ago, so we've discussed characters throughout films. But I really thought that Joseph Cotten merited a discussion, especially because I always have a great time having our discussions when we do this for your podcast.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a lot of fun. And I think that when we talk, you and I, when we talk, even during the conversations, like I have thoughts that I have coming in when we start the call, you know, but I'm propelled to think further, and you and I kind of heighten the game. Like I think when I talk to you, I think that you make me react to certain things, and we have certain ideas, and it propels the conversation and lifts it. And I thought that Joseph Cotten would be a fascinating actor to talk about because he's a fascinating actor that doesn't get enough talk.
Yeah, and so we'll go ahead and get started. And thank you very much for the compliments in there. I know I always get a lot coming at talking to you. You know, you mentioned the Dracula conversation. This actually predates the Dracula conversation. Actually, we've been talking about this conversation for a while, and I'm glad we're finally at the point where we can do this. I mean, I do wish we had been able to do this during November of last year because of the fact that would have been so all of these movies would have been perfect for like the whole noir Vember idea of covering film noir. And I think to a certain extent, you can make the case that all three of these are film noirs in a lot of ways. One very explicitly, and then the two somewhat indirectly, but because of the way that they handle their subjects, you can certainly make the case for them. You
Well,
know,
it was funny because I mentioned to you the other night when I finished watching Gaslight, I'm like, we picked three mysteries, and you're like,
yeah,
oh my god, we didn't even know this.
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, looking at his credits, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it to a certain extent. Um, we are not going to be discussing Citizen Kane in terms of the larger part of this discussion. A, because of the fact that I've already covered it twice on the podcast, and B, there's so much. I think it is important, especially with an actor like Cotten. And I mean, I do think to a certain extent that Leland is probably the role that I would say Cotten is probably best associated with still. Even after watching all three of these movies, which I think I would put his performances, at least in two of them, above his work in Kane. Um, but he was also the lead in Magnificent Andersons. He was also in Duel in the Sun. He's also in, let's see, what else is very noteworthy. Yeah,
You're
he's.
not going to mention Mario Bava's Barren Blood?
I mean, that's more that dude. You're the horror person. That's more that's more your bag. And you've seen it, and I have not. So yeah. I mean, the fact of the matter is, yeah, and he did Barren Blood. He did Soylent Green later in life. Whisper in the Dark, Airport 77. I mean, granted, some of these movies are very much, an actor, kind of something that an actor would naturally kind of, do at the end of their lives in order to, still be working. I mean, but also one of his last movies, I completely forgot he was in the movie. He's in Heaven's Gate, was one of his last movies. But the films that we are going to be discussing are, I think, three really rich discussions, not just for Cotten in particular, but because of the fact that they are all just truly fantastic films. We're going to start with 1944's Gaslight, directed by George Cukor and starring Ingrid Bergman as a singer whose aunt was brutally murdered, and she and Paula, Bergman's character, meets an accompanist while she is in Italy, and they fall in love and they get married, and they go home to live in her aunt's old home. And gradually, Paula begins to lose her grip on reality. And, obviously, there's a modern connotation to the phrase gaslighting. It came back in vogue several years ago with the election of Donald Trump. And it basically, to gaslight somebody is to make them. It basically is to make them feel like what they're seeing with their own eyes, what they're feeling in terms of their emotions is not real. And it is basically a form of psychological torture. And this was my first time watching it, actually, and it's not going to be the first time we talk about it, actually, on the podcast. We'll be talking about later on in the year in another context. but I have to say, I was absolutely captivated by this movie from the get go. And there are just so many tremendous performances in this movie. And Cotten in this movie plays a man who recognizes Paula as her aunt's niece and is concerned for her. And there's a sense of concern for her immediately. And he plays a police inspector, and he basically starts to put together the pieces of the mystery that Ingrid Bergman's character finds herself in.
So I wish that every discussion of the movie, or even blurbs about it, the blurb on Amazon and the blurb on IMDb both pretty much give it away.
Yeah.
And we're fully in spoiler territory here.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if I'm ruining the movie for anybody, but just go to the IMDb or pull it up on Amazon, and you're going to get, hey, listen, a woman is led to believe that she's insane by her husband. And the problem with that is that gives away the movie.
Yeah.
If you watch it, and I was trying to watch it in terms, because this was I've seen the other two movies before that we're going to discuss. I hadn't seen this one until the other night. And I pulled it up, and I'm like, I'm trying to put myself in the mind frame of the character, her, as opposed to putting myself in, I know what the twist is here.
Yeah.
Because when I go through it that way, it's weird, because he had the husband played by Charles Boyer, who also gives an excellent performance, in my estimation.
Yeah.
He starts off, and it seems like he's caring, and she's just forgetful. So you realize that she has been through some stuff, and we're first introduced to her in a meeting where she's singing with her instructor, her teacher, right? And her teacher basically tells her, and it's a brilliant setup that I don't think many people might catch. He says, "Oh, I can tell that your mind's really not on the singing. Like, something must be going on in your life."
Yeah.
So right there, you're setting that she's in an offset frame of mind, that she maybe is not everything she needs to be. And I think that's brilliant. I think many people might miss that when they're watching this the first time. I caught on that. And now when she gets to her husband, so little things are happening. He gives her a brooch. He says, he very specifically says, I'm going to put it right here because you're forgetful, and then it'll be safe. And then she, quote unquote, loses the brooch, right?
Yeah.
And then she's forgetting this and she's forgetting that. And he keeps telling her, oh, you're forgetful. You can't go out because, you might not make it back. Those sorts of things. You need to be cared for. You need to stay in the house, right? So now he's made her his prisoner. But if you don't know the twist right off, like, it builds up gradually.
Yeah.
It takes a while before they get in an argument, and he's telling her, no, you can't do this. Or, no, you're sick. I can't trust you to do this. You can't be trusted because you're not on top of your game. You're not there mentally, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's a gradual buildup, and about halfway through the scene, she wants to go someplace, and he explodes on her. And then it becomes, all right, here's where he starts to turn the screws. Now he's not just caring, now you can see the shades, even if you don't know what the giveaway is, that there's manipulation going on here. And this isn't just him being caring, now he's being controlling. And when does that line cross over?
Yeah.
One is too much caring, one is controlling. So if you're looking at it from that angle, then it's a little different than saying, oh, this is a movie about gaslight. Yeah. Which the title gives away only because, as you said, it's become a psychological term now. And I think it's a brilliant opening shot, because the opening shot is the credits over actual gaslights.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if people in your audience are going to know what a gaslight is. So this film was shot in, I don't remember, was it the 30s or the 40s? 40s,
this would have been 40s, yeah. So the original play that this is adapting was in 38. But yeah, the film is 1944. So yeah, it would have been the
So 80
43,
years.
44. So
Yeah, 80 years ago.
yeah.
So it's filmed in 1944. Actually, takes place in the 1880s, about 40, 60 years before that. So before electricity was such a popular thing, and again, I'm not an expert on when electricity became well spread, but you'd have gas built in to go into houses, and then you would turn a little knob on a light, like there'd be a little knob on there that you turn, like a regular light switch, where you turn the knob, and then you'd increase or decrease the gas.
Yeah.
So the actual, it's just, it's a brilliant opening scene because you're actually watching gas lights being turned on and up and down. And
Well,
that's going to come into play toward the end
yeah.
because the gas is shared across the house. So it's not like you flip on one light in one room and then another light in another room, like in modern day, and you have the same light. When you flip on one light, like if I were to flip on my light here, it would come full blast. If my sister were to turn it on in her room, that's going to distribute the gas and gas lights. So my light is actually going to become less luminous.
Yeah.
In later. Anyway, I don't want to get too geeked out on gaslighting, but yeah, that's the whole thing with gaslights.
Well,
I just think that's like everything in this film, Cukor sets up for what's coming later.
yeah.
And if you're not aware of what's coming, it's actually I think it's a brilliant setup what he does here.
It is, and I mean, just you mentioned that it very much reveals itself gradually. I mean, even if you are aware of the twists, even if you are aware of the concept of what this movie is, I think that still works exceptionally well. And a big part of that is Cukor as a director, who's a fantastic director. We talked about his film The Women on here a couple of years ago, and he is an absolutely wonderful director of women. He's very well known for his direction of women, and this was a performance where Ingrid Bergman won an Oscar for, deservingly so. She's fantastic in this movie. You mentioned Charles Boyer as Gregory Anton, the character Paula's husband. I think this is easily one of the. I think this is easily one of the best villains in movie history. I would very much put him, maybe not in the top 5, but at least the top 10 as far as villains. I love the way. I mean, it's right away we do kind of get an idea that we shouldn't necessarily be trusting this character, but I think that is, as we start to see more and more of what he does to Paula, I think that's where the brilliance of Boyer's performance comes out, and just how he's able to be very menacing, but also very convincing in being able to manipulate Paula as a character. And it's really a fascinating. It's a brilliant performance. I mean, all of the performances in this movie are fantastic, but I mean, I think Boyer is amazing in this. And you know, if we're talking about the true, you mentioned the gaslights, and part of the reason that this is the title of the play is because one of the things that Anton does as a character, as he starts to really starts to strip away Paula's sanity, is he gets the gaslights turned down, and he basically, and Paula notices this, and when Paula confronts him about it, he's like, "Oh no, you don't know what you're talking about. No, it's fine. It's all fine." That's where the title comes from. But yeah, this is such an. I didn't realize just how close this. I didn't realize just how much of a psychological thriller this was going to be, and it was absolutely captivating for me.
Well, here's the thing, too. See, Boyer is great in this because he doesn't tip his hand early. Like, it would have been very easy for a performer to go in and just be aggressive and screaming and, over the top with a role like this. But
Mm-hmm.
he shades it early. Like, see, here's the whole thing. If you, like I said, if you don't know the giveaway, if you don't know what the twist is, you can say to yourself, all right, well, here's a guy who is trying to take care of a woman who he's in love with. Okay, we've been told that. And he's basically at a point where he's got a wife who now is slipping, and he's got to be frustrated with that. And that anger, that frustration can build up and turn into anger when you're basically somebody's caregiver as well as their lover, right? And husband.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at it that way too. And then but like it's I think it's about halfway into the film when you really start to realize that something's off here with him.
Yeah.
Like even if you don't know the twist, at about the halfway point, you say, all right, well, now this is just like, now he's just manipulating and he's pretty much being a dick.
Yeah.
There's a point where she wants to put more wood on the fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that scene is excellent because it shows how cruel he can be, right?
Yeah.
So he makes her call one of the servants, played by Angela Lansbury, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Angela Lansbury.
I think this is one of her first performances too. I think this is one of her first movies too.
I think it is, yeah. Sort of a long, great career. Everyone from my generation associates her with Murder, She Wrote, because I'm an 80s kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, she had a long, sterling career for a very long time between Hollywood and Broadway. So she's already convinced that the maid doesn't like her, right?
Yeah.
So she's like, no, don't make me call her. And he says, no, you're not supposed to do this. This is why I hired people, right?
Yeah.
So he's controlling right there. The maid comes in. She's now angry because she's got to come up the stairs and do something that, obviously Paula could very much do herself. And you can see the resentment between the two of them. They clearly don't like her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he then turns it into an argument once that's done. Now, he's already got her off base. She didn't want to call the girl. The girl's resentful of her. And then this blows up into a whole argument about how she doesn't like the girl. And, basically Boyer's character is like, hey, listen, I'm the man of the house here, and I need to have things run a certain way, and this is how they're going to run, and this is how you need to run when I'm not here. And that whole thing is him starting to tighten his grip, and it's just it's psychological sadism is what it is, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
but
absolutely.
when you realize that this whole thing, when you realize what the payoff of this is supposed to be, and we can talk about that later. When you realize what the payoff of this is supposed to be and why he's going through all this, like there have to be easier ways to do what he needs to do than all he's going through.
Yeah.
And less cruel ways, obviously, to do what he needs to do,
I mean, let's also because I mean, we're not giving the entire game away, but I mean, we are also, there's also a very specific reason why he chose her. There's also a very specific reason why she chose her that I think is important to consider when it comes to this movie in general. So, but yeah, I do want to get into and this was Angela Lansbury's debut in films, and it's funny because of the fact that like this is 3 movies now from her decades as an actress, as a movie actress, well before Murder, She Wrote, where I've seen her in, and she's basically playing a villain in a way in all 3 of them. Like, it's debatable just how much of a villain she is in this movie. She just, we know she doesn't necessarily like Bergman's character, but I don't know how villainous she is. In 1955, she was in a film noir that I reviewed a couple of years ago called My Life at Stake, which was absolutely terrific, and she kind of plays the femme fatale character. And then obviously her most famous film role in The Manchurian Candidate, where she is again one of the best truly one of the best villains in movie history. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it is the you're right. Like, there's got to be an easier way of getting through this, but again, there's a very specific reason that we haven't really discussed as to why why he is going through this to do what he's trying to do. And,
well, real quick
yeah.
before we get into that, as far as Angela Lansbury's character goes, so here's the thing with her, okay? It's revealed in one scene that there's some sexual tension here because she's portrayed as somebody, and it's mentioned several times that, hey, she goes out with pretty much every guy in town. So the loose morals thing that would be in the 40s. I mean, she's not supposed to judge people that way modern times.
Right.
But she would be, considered a loose woman,
Yeah.
So she comes on to Boyer's character at one point. He doesn't take it. He doesn't take the bait because he's got more grander schemes than that.
Right.
But the whole thing is that she is definitely looked upon as a character of loose morals. Mm. So, judging by the moral compass in the 40s, she would have been looked at as not a good character. She's not really a killer or a villain per se. But, one of the first things that our inspector here, Joseph Cotten, does is get one of his officers onto this particular detail that covers this house, and he has her. It's implied that officer is sleeping with her to get information. So, I mean, it's just she's not, and she's you think of her as murder, and again, it's impossible. I know I've seen her in other things, and I try not to judge her this way. But it's impossible to see her and not think of Murder, She Wrote in my mind. That's so ingrained.
No doubt.
That show was on forever. My grandmother watched that show when she stayed with us on the weekends in the 80s when I was a kid. And it's impossible to not think of her as this, old lady detective who only has the best of things in mind for everybody. You're trying to solve every world's mystery, But seeing her in this role is particularly enjoyable because she's not. Like, she's pretty nasty. Yeah. She's not a nice character at all. And they play her off against the older maid because the older maid is nice and caring and sweet. So it's that dichotomy there between those two. I just think that everything in this movie is brilliantly set up. But I'm going to go off track, so go ahead, Brian.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about Cotten's part in this role, in this movie, because of the fact that I love the fact that we are introduced to his character not as a police detective, but just as somebody who admired Paula's aunt and was very. And one of the things that I love in the introduction of him in this movie is that you get the sense that he has a lot of empathy, not just because of the fact that he's with his niece and nephew at the time, but the fact that you can tell in his face that there's something when Paula and Gregory pass by him. There's something he senses that something's wrong, and I love that this comes from an emotional perspective in terms of Cotten's character than just a simple police procedural factor. I mean, it does become that, and that part is added, but it's not the most important part. And I think that's a big part of why when Cotten ultimately confronts Bergman in this movie, that scene works as well as it does because of the fact that he's coming at it from an emotional perspective more than just a procedural police perspective.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's an emotional involvement. There's a human element to it. So, like you said, the fact that he's with his niece and nephew grounds him as a human being. He's not just a cop at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other two police officers, the commissioner and the guy that he puts on the detail there, they're both cops. That's all they are. But he's got that human element, and it's like, hey, listen, I saw your aunt play when I was very, very young, and I asked to go and meet her, and she gave me one of her gloves, and he still has the glove. Now, I'd like to see if you can explain his character to me in this note. I don't understand why an American is a chief inspector in London. I don't understand how I think he's got the connections to high society through his parents, he says, right? Because he's basically, like, he goes to this very lavish party at one point with hundreds of people, and there's a personal performance by some famous pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, where is he? Like, this is the weirdest character for him to play. He's an American who's playing he's an American, pardon my language. He's an American who's playing a cop in Britain. He's playing an American in Britain who is a British cop, and he's supposed to be like a cop, and he's got all these fancy high society connections. So I can't really piece any of that together. I kind of say, all right, well, maybe this role was originally written for somebody British. I can see that.
I would imagine so. And it was a matter of him just being the best part. Him just being the best choice for the part, as opposed to, and he probably would have had a certain degree of cachet when it comes to box office because of Kane, because of Magnificent Ambersons. He would have been somebody that audiences were aware of at the time.
Sure.
So yeah, look, let's be perfectly honest. Let's be clear that the idea of Americans playing characters in England, let's not act like that's something that Hollywood has always been good with. And I
suppose it wouldn't stick out so much, and I kind of let it go because I'm like, this is a great movie. This is my only gripe with this movie.
Right.
And I'm like, this is so small and inconsequential. The role was probably written for a Brit, and basically they probably hired the most talented guy, who's going to have some box office draw to play the part. Yeah. All that makes sense. But I'm like, it wouldn't bother me so much if he were playing a Brit in this role, but he's not. He's clearly American.
I will say I admire them for at least not going, hey, could you do a British accent? Because let's be clear, if he tried to do a British accent and he didn't necessarily do a good job, it'd be all we think about. So, I'm fine with that. I understand where you're coming from, but I'm ultimately fine with the choice just because of the fact that he's terrific in the role.
I also kind of appreciate that they don't have the 3-minute thing where somebody says to him, hey, you're a British cop? Why are you here from America?
Oh, yeah.
And then he goes into a minute explanation just to tie it up. Like, it would have stopped the movie to a dead halt for absolutely no purpose. Yeah. To give this guy 30 seconds worth of background, so I'm fine with that. It just sticks out. But again, great performance. I'm not arguing about that. And the thing is, we're going to talk about this in the next one when we talk about Third Man. Cotten's character here, Officer Cameron, is ahead of the game. Right? He knows what's going on. He's piecing it together. And he's well aware of it before anybody is aware that he's onto this, before Paula knows any of this, because obviously she's been set up to the point where she's, being convinced that she's insane, right? Yeah. To the point where Anton says toward the end of the movie, he's like, look, I'm going out, and basically if you keep acting like this, some men are going to come to the house. So when Cotton's character shows up and insists on going and talking to her, she thinks he's going to commit her to an insane asylum. Yeah. It's interesting because, like, a lot of times movies spell out things for you and spell out things for the characters, but what characters do and don't know here is kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Anton doesn't know that anybody's onto him at this point.
Yeah.
His wife has questions because she says, I know I didn't leave the brooch. I know I didn't move that picture off the wall that was always there because you can see the outline of the dust on the wall and it's clear for the picture where the
Mm-hmm.
picture was. And we're kind of saying to ourselves at that point, well, yeah, maybe she didn't because this is starting to seem like a manipulative sort of thing here.
Yeah.
But Anton also doesn't know that he knows that Cameron exists because he sees Cameron. Well, Cameron is Cotton's character. He sees Cotton in the park, and he's instantly suspicious about it. And when she wants to go to that big thing, that big soiree with the pianist playing the famous pianist,
Yeah.
I think Anton says to her, "What do you want to see that guy there that was in the park?"
Yeah.
So he's playing it. He's playing off Cotton's character, like, hey, I can use this to my advantage to manipulate her to make her feel like, hey, you have feelings for somebody other than me. All you tell me is you love me, you love me, you love me, right?
Yeah.
But he also doesn't know that Cotton's character is in on his grand overall scheme here.
Mm-hmm.
So what characters do and don't know is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Because when you get to Holly Martin's in the next film we're going to talk about is so far behind the game that he only really finds out in the last 15 minutes of the movie what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Detective Cameron here is hell-bent on putting all this information together. And there's a revelation about some jewels that come up, and that ties the whole thing together.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that is something that is really real. It's something that's absolutely fascinating with this, and it's just such this film is such a slow burn. It's such a wonderful slow burn. Like, you don't necessarily realize you intellectually know something is going on with it, but you don't necessarily realize what's going on with it and until the movie is ready to tell you. And yeah, I mean, the fact that Gregory is using the character of Cameron in his game, not aware of what Cameron knows or what Cameron's figuring out, it's just absolutely perfect. But you already mentioned our next film, and I think that would be a good way to segue to our next film. It is the classic 1949 film noir directed by Carol Reed, The Third Man, based on...
I'm sorry, I just want to ask you before we move on one question about that last scene in Gaslight, right?
Okay.
So the gig is up now. We find out that, and I found it fascinating because I looked up the IMDb on Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman, and I'm like, he's like 15 years older than her.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a little odd, and then I realized that plays into it because she was the little girl on the stairs when he murdered the aunt, right?
Yeah.
So he murdered the aunt because he was the aunt's lover, and he was trying to get the jewelry, right? There's these jewels that are worth so much money, right? And again, Cotten and he fight, and they have I don't think they really show much of it, but he opens the door in the attic, and he's got Boyer tied to a chair, right?
Yeah.
And he brings Paula in, and he says, look, we've got him now. We're going to take him away. And then she says, look, can you leave me alone with him? And he's like, I really shouldn't do that. She's like, look, I need to say some things here. I need to be alone. And Cotten says, okay, I'll let you do that. Right? Well, I'm pretty sure that Cotten says to himself, his character has to say to himself, hey, look, this woman might do some nasty things in here while I have this door closed.
Right.
And I'm kind of like, let that happen. Like, that's what I read into that. Was your read on that the same?
I didn't necessarily know that. I mean, I didn't necessarily think about it in those terms. I do think to a certain extent, the caution... I do think the caution from Cotton's character and leaving her alone is more from a perspective of, is she, can I trust that she's not going to be able to be further manipulated by this character. I think that's more where it's coming from than a matter of, oh, she's going to she's going to do something physically awful to him. I didn't necessarily think that was the case.
That only clicked in when she pulls out the knife and she's like, this knife that I don't have in my hand because it's a fantasy. Because then she's playing the whole thing about, hey, you've told me this entire time that I have no real perspective on reality. Well, obviously, I don't have a knife in my hand to be telling me I have a knife in my hand. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time I've seen it, and I'm like, oh my God, she's going to murder him and go to jail for this. And then she doesn't. So I just thought that was an interesting way to let her. And it's nice to see that she ultimately wins, even though she doesn't actually do anything to harm him or murder him. Yeah. They take him away at the end. She's got some, because they have that scene at the very end scene is her and Cotten on the balcony outside on the roof. And he basically says to her, hey, listen, sometimes things that happen in the night, you don't even realize, like, they just kind of disappear when the sun comes up. Yeah. And I think that's his way of saying to her is, hey, listen, you're going to get back to where you need to get to. It's going to take some time, but this is just going to be a dark part of your life that you'll eventually move past. I thought that was a great thing for his character and her character as well, because it gives her some optimism, and it lets him tie up his feelings for the end and what he's done here with the investigation. So just top-notch ending for a top-notch film, I'd say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we are going to transition to Carol Reed's The Third Man, written by Graham Greene and starring Joseph Cotten. He plays Holly Martins, an author who comes to post-war Vienna to stay with his friend Harry Lime, and finds out almost immediately that Harry Lime has been found dead. And one of the first places we see Holly goes to is Harry Lime's funeral. And throughout the rest of the film, we basically follow Holly as he is gradually being led into Lime's world and the mystery surrounding Lime's death, because apparently there might have been a third person who found Lime's body, and we don't necessarily know who that is. And this movie is fascinating. This was not the first time I had seen this. I had seen this years ago. One of the things that is really fascinating about this is the fact that the Vienna it sets up here is basically split between several different countries. Like, there are several different countries where, like, they have jurisdiction over different parts of the city. And I think that's fascinating. And it's one of the things that leads, I think, to the confusion surrounding Harry Lime's death. And we see Holly get involved with with Harry's girlfriend, Anna, played by Alida Valli. And at first she seems very unsure of who Harry... Sometimes she seems as unsure of who Harry is as anybody in the movie. But as the film progresses, we start to realize she probably knows more than she's laying on. And being film noir, that basically is kind of the way it is.
So I'd like to mention that in a previous discussion, we discussed, you and I on your podcast here, we discussed The Bicycle Thief, right? So The Bicycle Thief is it's a very sad film. And the thing is that it is set in post-war Italy, where, poverty is on the rise. Everyone's trying to get a job. the poor guy, his sole lifeline to doing work is his bicycle, and his bicycle gets stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Here we get a post-war view of Austria, particularly Vienna. And I found this fascinating in contrast, because these are two very, very different movies, The Bicycle Thief and The Third Man. The Third Man, and there's a speech at the beginning, which I believe is voiced over by George Cukor himself, I read somewhere, I think. That speech at the beginning basically says, hey, listen, so Vienna has been split into 4 different territories, 4 different jurisdictions. I know it's the Russians, it's the Russians, the British, the French, and I can't remember who the 4th one was. So the whole thing is that the city's been split into 4 different jurisdictions, and there's so much going on here in this previously war-torn Vienna, that it's very hard to figure what's going on here with the law, right? They're all trying to establish law within their quadrants. And because of this confusion, and because of the 4 different quadrants, and because of the movement of things between them, there is basically a huge black market that has risen up in the wake of the end of World War II, right?
Yeah.
Which is going to play a huge part into this film, because it's all about, the film is basically about how this American, he comes there to see his friend, Harry Lime, and Holly says, I came here because, Harry says he was going to give me a job, right?
Yeah.
Because so Holly Martins is a really interesting character, because he's basically a dime store novelist.
Yeah.
He writes these westerns, and there's this running gag where one of the British soldiers keeps mentioning the novels, how he's a big fan. Whereas Calloway, our main British guy, doesn't have any need for these novels, right? Because he's got enough in the real world right now. But that particular point of view is really interesting, because he's a very American author. He's writing about very American things because he's writing about westerns, right?
Yeah.
But you get the idea that he's writing these dime store, trite, trope-laden novels about westerns, because it's the naive American view, right? That's really what it is. And that plays so much into his character. And it's interesting because, like I said, in Gaslight, Cotten's character is so far ahead of the game. Here in The Third Man, he's so far behind the game, trying to figure out what's going on. And he really doesn't piece it together. Well, we'll talk about that later. But
yeah. Well, I think Martins is such a fascinating character in this movie, and he's such a fascinating protagonist, and in part because of what you're saying about him, but also I think to a certain extent he is somebody, he feels very world weary in this movie. He feels like somebody who doesn't have a sense of direction, and I think you could make the case for that being very emblematic of how a lot of people felt after World War II. They weren't, and especially with all of the destruction in Europe, like how do you, like, because I mean you get the sense that he's there, like you said, he's there because Harry was going to get him a job. It's like that basically means he's not leaving anything very pressing behind in his previous life. So
I get the feeling that he's not very proud of the writing he does. Look, I've been writing my entire life, and every time I sit down to write something, whether it's for when I was writing for Death Ensemble, when I'm writing a script or a story or whatever, I've always taken immense pride in my work. Whereas Harry's not Harry. I'm doing what she does. I call him Harry. Ollie here seems to be like, hey, he's just writing because he's got a particular talent with words that he can put to use. I think he knows he's a hack,
Yeah.
And he just doesn't care. Like you said, there's nothing pressing for him in America. Mm-hmm. There's nothing pressing for him as a novelist. And it's kind of funny that several people the one soldier and then the guy who runs the literary society both seem to know that he's an author.
Yeah.
Which is really fun. Because I'm figuring that probably 99% of Americans don't know that this guy's an author at this point,
Yeah.
But his character, like you said, is fascinating because you can tell I can only imagine. Look, I had relatives long dead before I was alive who were in World War II. I can only imagine what a terrifying, horrifying, emotional, psychological devastation that must have put on the people of the world at that point.
Yeah.
You know, but it's really fascinating here because so apparently David O. Selznick wanted wanted Carol Reed to film this thing on sets on backlots.
Yeah.
And Carol Reed was like insistent. He's like, no, I have to film this in Vienna.
Yeah.
Which is one of the greatest assets because the city of Vienna is a character here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the fascinating things is, if you know, well, it tells you at the beginning that it's post World War II. But if you know about World War II and you know about bombing and those things, like there are several scenes where characters are traversing these giant piles of bricks. They're sliding down, or they're in the background, and I'm like, okay, those used to be buildings.
Yeah.
Well, not just piles of brick because some construction worker left them around. Those used to be buildings.
Mm-hmm.
People used to live in those buildings. There may be body parts in those ruins.
Yeah.
And that rubble is so informative, not just of why the characters are interacting the way they are, but what is going on with the city itself and why the city is the way it is. That it plays in perfectly with the story.
No, absolutely.
Selznick wanted to do this on the cheap, apparently, and film. If you had filmed this on backstages, I don't care if it was today or in the 40s, you never would have gotten the same cinema verite.
No,
none of that would have come across.
No, look, the fact of the matter is, this is one of the quintessential film noirs, and I think
absolutely.
a huge part of film noir is the authenticity of the characters in the narrative, but also the backdrop and also the landscapes. And one of the things that this film benefits from tremendously is obviously shooting on location in Vienna, but also the way Carol Reed uses the Dutch angle, the way he uses very deep black and white cinematography.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is, this is in a very real way. This movie gets to the heart of film noir in a way that a lot of film noirs at the time would have only dreamed of. And
sure,
that's just talking about the location. That's not even talking about the story, where you can see Holly Martins to a certain extent as a film noir protagonist. He's not the same type of protagonist as in Ulmer's Detour, where it seems like everything that he does just turns to bad luck. He's somebody, though, but what he is he's somebody disillusioned with the world that he was living in and trying to find a different way in, and it arguably leads him into a situation where that is going to disillusion him further once he gets to the truth of Harry Lime. And Harry Lime, of course, is played by Orson Welles in one of his great performances of his career, if not his greatest.
Spot on, perfect performance out of Welles. Look, I'm going to be honest. One of the reasons we're not talking about Citizen Kane is that I asked you that we don't talk about Citizen Kane. I have been a huge Orson Welles fan since I was a kid, and I hadn't seen Orson Welles' Citizen Kane for a long, long time. I think I was in my 20s when I finally saw it.
Yeah.
And then I sat through it, and I'm like, oh my God, how is it that I love Orson Welles? This is like his universally renowned best film, and I can't stand this film. Like, it's so boring. I don't care about guys who run newspapers. I don't really associate with rich people. The whole thing with Rosebud at the end, I'm like, this is it? This is what everybody talks about? But Orson Welles, I got to give credit, is great. He plays that character at 3 different stages of life. He's throwing his all into it. This is his everything. But I would put Harry Lime as his best performance. I love him in this movie. And it's such a small part, but he owns it, and it's integral to everything that's going around with him.
Yeah.
And interplay between him and Joseph Cotten is just, it's beautiful. That scene, I will talk about that scene on the carousel. I'm not scared yet.
I mean,
there we go.
One of the things that's fantastic when you have the scenes between Cotten and Wells in here, they really do, I think, play off of what iconography the dynamic between Wells and Cotten had because of Kane and because of Magnificent Ambersons. It's like you can tell that those actors have a mutual respect for one another as a scene contributor, as scene players, as co-stars, and it's a very natural progression, the way that the discussion between Holly and Harry Lime plays out. I mean, I still lean more towards Quinlan from Touch of Evil as Will's best performance, but
probably my second favorite performance. Yeah, that's
now that I've rewatched The Third Man, I can completely understand why Harry Lime is considered one of his greats. He is tremendous.
The thing is that Joseph Cotten is playing the protagonist in this film.
Yeah.
Even though that Orson Welles didn't direct this, and he only wrote the Cuckoo speech, we'll talk about that. That's a great speech. He's in the thing, like I said. I think his screen time is probably 10 minutes in an hour and 45-minute film, maybe, if that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, this is an Orson Welles film. It really is. I mean, the whole thing about it is, it's all revolving around his character. When he shows up, he owns it. And I love the very last thing we see of him, which we'll talk about once we get to the ending. But again, Orson Welles was a fascinating actor. And it's a shame that, at the end of his career on the downward slide there, he's doing Paul Masson commercials and he's drunk and they had to film it 57 times for him to get his one line down. In his very last film role, I saw in the theaters, I have to say, The Transformers, the movie.
Yeah, same.
He's the voice of Unicron.
No,
My
same.
mom took us to see that when we were kids, and I'm like, I knew the voice because I knew him from the commercials. He was on the Muppet Show. And I'd always heard of Citizen Kane. I'm like, this is just amazing.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the thing is, it's like I think Wells had an appreciation for film noir as a narrative. And then as a narrative structure to play in. Because, I mean, he directed film noir. It's not just Touch of Evil. He also directed The Stranger. He directed The Lady from Shanghai. And I mean, he's somebody who really saw the storytelling potential to get to some of these weighty humanist subjects in terms of like really uncovering seedier sides of characters. I mean, which is, and really you could almost consider, in a way, Citizen Kane a film noir because of the fact that it is really exploring the way a character devolves into a shell of who he is, who he thought he was and who he could have been.
Orson Welles was fascinating, and I still think he's one of the greatest filmmakers today. Mm-hmm. He's always captivating when he's on screen, even when he's doing, under makeup, or he's, in this. If you've ever seen the original version of his Macbeth, he does a Scottish accent that's absolutely bizarre, But I loved Orson Welles because every one of his film was looking into the flaws of characters. Like he's always playing flawed humans. He's obsessed with flawed humans, and like even Anderson's, the next film that he makes with Cotten after Citizen Kane, it's about a flawed family. It's about the darker side of the American dream. A lot of what he does, and that fits in perfectly here because Harry Lime is an American who's come to this country, right? He's come to Vienna, and it's never really shaken out why at the beginning. But then you find out that he's dealing in some very underhanded stuff with some very underhanded characters, and that leads to his quote-unquote death.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the greatest movie to have two funeral scenes for the same Orson Welles character. Gotta say that.
Yeah.
So Harry Lime has come to Vienna here and gotten involved in the black market, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, so Holly Morton comes here on the prospect that he's going to have work. And when he actually meets with Lime on the Ferris wheel there, Lime offers to cut him in on what he's doing, right? And I think that the whole thing is like Holly never says what the work is supposed to be. But I'm kind of thinking that Harry Lime is saying to himself, well, listen, I got this great racket going here selling watered down penicillin that's basically killing people, but I'm making a huge profit off it, right?
Yeah.
And I can cut you in on this. Now, I know I guarantee he didn't spell out any of that to Holly, but I'm pretty sure that's why he's bringing Holly here. Holly's a pretty smart guy. He's loyal, obviously, because this whole film, like he comes there and he's dead, and then the British guy in the bar, when they're in the bar, tells him, listen, I'll get you a ticket home. You could be on the plane tomorrow. We'll put you up in a hotel for the night, right? But all he's got to do is get on that plane and you don't have a movie and nothing happens, right?
Yeah.
Holly goes on his merry way back to America, does his writing. And Harry Lime goes on doing what he's doing, and Anna does her thing, right? But the whole thing is that Holly won't let this go. Holly's like, I'm loyal to my friends here. Like, I want to know what happened here. Because he gets different information. Like, the Baron says, oh, well, he was dead. He was crossing the street, got hit by a car. By the time I got there, he was dead. Yeah. Oh, but he said certain things. And Holly's like, wait a second. You just told me he was dead when you got there. So what's going on here? Mm-hmm. And then the porter, who doesn't speak very good English, is the one who mentions the third man at this. It's the Baron, it's Popescu, and it's this third man. But then the porter doesn't want to get involved because he's worried for his life, and well, that doesn't really help him anyway because he ends up getting killed, right? Yeah. But the whole thing is, Holly could have let this go at any point. Holly didn't need to get involved except for the fact that he's loyal to his friend, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing. That this is about loyalty between people, and what happens when that loyalty goes askew because these two men are from totally different moral objectives here, moral high grounds or low grounds, right? Yeah. Holly doesn't want any part of it. When they're on the Ferris wheel and Wells goes to cut him in, he's like, I don't want any part of that. Like, I don't want to do that. I just want you to give yourself in. I know that's not going to happen, but we have to work this out where, you know, like I can't be part of that. Yeah. And then, like, it's beautiful because at one point toward the end, he's like, hey, listen, I'm just going to go back to America. Can you fly me to the airport? And then the military guy driving to the airport. He's like, I just want to make one stop if you don't mind. It'll be quick. And then he takes Holly into the hospital and shows him all these kids and all these people that have been affected by the bad penicillin. And it's amazing because you get a perspective shot, which shot from the character's point in the bed, and you see like the frame at the bottom of the bed, the foot of the bed. Mm-hmm. You never see these people. You don't know what they look like. But it's horrifying, even more horrifying, because you don't see them, I think, right? Yeah. But Holly sees them, he clearly knows what's going on. Holly can't live with them, you know? So you have these flawed characters, like there are suggestions that Holly's an alcoholic. He does get drunk, I think, twice in the film, you know? Mm-hmm. He certainly likes his drinks. And, you know, you get the idea that this is a flawed character, but his one thing that I wouldn't count as a character flaw is his loyalty. Yeah. Right? And that drives the whole film as far as his character goes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. So let's talk about the cuckoo speech. Right? It has to come up. This is the one thing I knew long before I ever saw this movie. And I wish I had it pulled up on my computer, but my computer shut off right now because I did want to do that. So basically, as they're on the Ferris wheel, right? Because, actually, let's step back for a second. Right? He's out in the alley, it's night, and there's somebody in the shadows, and a cat's licking this character's boot in the shadows, right? And Holly, they sent people to kill him earlier in the night, so he thinks this is somebody coming to murder him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, all right, he's across the street. And he's like, all right, come out now. Come out now, I got you. You can do what you want. I don't really care. And they keep this character framed in shadows until it's brilliant the way it's done because Holly's making so much noise in the street that it wakes a woman up and she opens her window and puts on a light and the light flashes for a second and you see Orson Welles.
Yeah.
And he sees Orson Welles and he says, Harry. And then Harry disappears into the night. Right? So they end up on the Ferris wheel and it's like, hey, listen, I know what you're doing here. I know what you've done. And he's like, I've been to the police. And he's like, look, that was a bad, bad move. And then he's like, look, I'm not a bad guy. Like, look at all this. And it's really his view of humanity physically from where he's at and his view of humanity morally is absolutely disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, look, see those little dots down there, all right? Now you're telling me that it's a sin that these people are dying and you're holding me responsible for killing them. But if you just saw those dots down there and I gave you $20,000 per dot to eliminate each dot, would you have the same feeling if it was just those dots? Mm-hmm. Like, that's all they are to me. These aren't people. This is just business, you know? And then he says, you know, basically, if I gave you $20,000 a pop to do that, I don't think you'd be on such high moral ground. And then he suggests, hey, listen, from this height, it would be easy to get rid of you because I could throw you off the Ferris wheel here and nobody would have any questions. Right?
Yeah.
So they finally get to the point where they're on the ground and they have come to a stalemate here. Neither one is given an inch of things. And then and Orson Welles, this is a brilliant speech and he wrote it. And I'm glad he did and that Reed decided to keep this in the movie because it's absolutely brilliant. He basically says, hey, listen, you know, the Borgias for 30 years ran Italy, right? And in that time, they had warfare and barbarism and murder and all these, you know, all these terrible things. But they also produced some of the greatest artists, some of the greatest art, some of the greatest thinkers in the history of man within those 30 years. Mm-hmm. The Swiss, all right? The Swiss had 500 years of peace and democracy. Nothing ever happened, and what did they produce? The cuckoo clock. And it's a fucking great speech, Brian.
Yeah. Because
the whole sums up the entire movie. Like, it's like, hey, listen, there's all this barbarism and war going on here, but there's things to be made of that. There's, within this chaos, there are things that can be created here. Whereas relative peace, that doesn't do anybody any good, especially somebody like Harry Lime, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think that speech is such an iconic speech, and it's, you know, it's like I said, I heard that speech long before I ever saw the movie, mm-hmm. and it informs the entire film, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, it does in its own way. It brings up a fascinating philosophical discussion of, like, obviously people love the idea of peace and, you know, just peace and no violence and stuff like that. But at the same time, I mean, there are things that are created as a result of violence and disruption and chaos that will live on forever. And, you know, if all you have is peace, what are you drawing off of for inspiration? It's a fascinating idea.
And it fits in perfectly with his character too, because he's taking advantage of all that violence and all that chaos of a world war that devastated 2/3 of the globe for his own personal advantage here, and he's profiting from it, you know. Mm-hmm. So it not only is this great speech about how terrible humanity is, but it's also this great speech about that zeroes in on exactly what Harry Lime is and why.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about things that are created in terms of inspired by moments of violence and a chaotic world, we would be remiss, obviously, to talk about the Third Man without bringing up the remarkable Zither soundtrack by Anton Karas, which
The
is,
world's most famous zither score to a film.
and honestly, one of the most important scores, I think, to a movie when it comes to the way it plays into the narrative of the film. I think the 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 use of the zither, it's an instrument that sounds both chipper and melancholy, and that makes a lot of sense for the main character, but also the city of Vienna in general. When you're talking about the Third Man, because of the fact that, I mean, it's there's a sadness to the city that has basically been overrun by corruption, but there's also a cheerful potential opportunity for potential in this, which is ultimately what Holly is coming here for. I mean, he's coming to, you know, realize some potential to get away from the life that he has before. And then as we get further and further, we see that melancholy really play out in the film.
But it's also perfect because I like that you mentioned about Holly coming there for potential. Because his whole relationship with the female here, well, she's not really a femme fatale, but his whole relationship with her, she's Lime's ex-girlfriend. She has certain intel about things that she has, seen from Harry and what she knows about him. And like I said, she kind of reveals that as she goes. But he very much falls for her. And there's that grasping for potential to say, hey, maybe even though I've come here and my friend is dead, maybe I will never figure this out, and maybe I will, and maybe all this stuff is crashing down around me, but maybe there's the potential here for me to fall in love and make something of my life, like have that connection. Because there's that back and forth between them where they mention something. He says, I think Harry stole his girl at one point, and she's like, oh, well, she says something about the girl. He's like, oh, that was like 9 years ago, So I have a feeling that even on the relationship front, like Holly it seems like the only relationship before he meets her that means anything into his life is Harry here. He doesn't seem to have any, like you said, he comes there without any pressing needs in America. Like, it doesn't seem like he has any ties, And I think that that's the same way on a romantic, emotional level with women, and I think that's why he's so fascinated and falls in love with her, to the point where he makes a deal where, because there's that whole thing about a passport being illegitimate. Harry forged her a passport, and then Harry turned her in on that to use her as a pawn.
Yeah.
Right? So the whole thing is that, hey, listen, I'll do what you want me to do with Harry. I'll sell out my friend. I'll sell out my own morals if you get her passport and get her on a train. Mm-hmm. So there's that whole element. But getting back to the zither, it's just, first off, I talked about Gaslight, the credits actually being over the Gaslight. This film starts with credits over a zither playing. And I think that's fascinating as well, because that zither is really, like you said, it's perfectly emblematic of what this film is. It's that there's potential and joy and happiness in the sound, but there's also that melancholy on the underside that informs this film to a T.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, in this movie, this is one of those movies that really does, when people talk about vibes in movies, this movie is very much a movie about vibes, and it comes from the location, it comes from the wariness of Cotten's character, it comes from the soundtrack. And that's not a bad thing in this movie. I think it's an essential part of this movie and why this movie's connected the way it has for um, 75 years actually. I think we're coming up on 75 years for it.
75.
So yeah. Um, but yeah, it's a rich film. I mean, it's usually on one of the streaming sites. I believe it's on. I believe I watched it off of Max, but I think it's also on Criterion Channel right now. And it. If you're interested in film noir, at some point you get to the Third Man, and I think it's just a fantastic film, and it's a great example of Cotton's talent just in general.
Absolutely.
So we are going to round up the trio. We're going to go back in time to 1943 and a film from the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, his thriller Shadow of a Doubt. And this is one, it's funny because of the fact that I thought I might have seen this one before, but I could not completely remember. And then as it unfolded, I realized, oh, yes, I've definitely seen this one before. It's been a while, but I definitely seen this one. And so, Joseph Cotten plays Charlie Oakley, who is who comes to visit and live with his sister's family in California. Unbeknownst to them, he is a suspect in a serial killer, in a string of serial killers. And his niece, also named Charlie, played by Teresa Wright, starts to realize that something is not quite right about him. And the film becomes a psychological dance between the two of them. And this is... I love that, we sort of talked about it before recording. I love you wanted to touch on this one last, and I love that ended up being the choice because of the fact that, I think as we follow Cotton's characters throughout this trio of films, we see a progression from somebody who's more often a genuine hero in Gaslight to somebody who is who becomes a true villain, and then is somebody who's in between and get in Third Man. And I think that's really a fascinating progression that we follow in this film.
No, I think that's great. And Joseph Cotten, really not a guy who played a lot of villains, so it's fascinating on that end. I kind of asked you to do it this way, and I thought this was a great sequence because we start off with, this beautiful palatial house in London. Then we go to the, war-torn city of Vienna. And as an American who's never traveled to Europe, those places are very, fantastical and very different for me. And then we wind it up by bringing it back right down to small-town America in a screenplay written by Mr. Small Town America himself, Thornton Wilder, by the way. So, Mr. Our Town himself. But yeah, I thought this was a fascinating look at things to do it this way, because if you want to see that Joseph Cotten isn't the same in every film, watch these three films in the order we discussed them.
Yeah.
And then you get here and you realize that he can flex his muscles in different ways, and he is very, very compelling as the bad guy in this.
Yeah, and it's funny because of the fact that, I think we're, with these three films, I think we're also touching on another thing that kind of made the Academy not quite sure why, unsure to nominate him, because of the fact that I think the Academy sometimes is not quite sure what to do with actors who are capable of a wide variety. A lot of the people who they tend to nominate and win tend to win in the Oscars, it tends to be people who have, you can kind of get a gauge on as in terms of their performances, and the people who are more rewarded tend to be those who you can kind of nail down their persona. And I think with Cotten you really can, and this is an amazing example of this. I think to a certain extent this might be the best performance of the three for me. I mean, it's up there with the Third Man for me as far as these three Joseph Cotten performances. I think this might be his best one, and I think a big part of that is the dynamic he has with Teresa Wright. And, Teresa Wright is an actress who, she has a lot of heavy lifting in this movie, and love what I love the way the character is developed, how she's somebody, and I love the way the dynamic is developed. I mean, we get the idea that these two are connected by something more than just a name at the beginning, because of the fact that she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna see if Uncle Charlie's gonna come," and it's like, "Oh, he's already sent a telegram saying he's on his way." So now, granted, we know why he's done that, but they don't know why he's done that. And I just love the way that this turns the screws of suspense in a way that is very different from a lot of Hitchcock films. And I think that's what makes this one stand out, even among the very best, I think.
Well, I've already committed heresy by saying that I'm not a fan of Citizen Kane. I'm going to commit double heresy by saying I'm not really a Hitchcock guy. I appreciate everything he's done. I understand how brilliant his compositions are. There's never anything so much as a wasted frame. Everything in the mise-en-scene means something within the movie and has a connection to it. I totally agree with all that. And I guess I can prove that I'm not really a Hitchcock fan by telling you that my favorite Hitchcock movie is To Catch a Thief, and I may be the only human being ever to have said that. Okay? The thing here is that, and I guess I should appreciate this, but it's so offsetting because this is not a mystery. We know straight out from the beginning that Joseph Cotten is the Merry Widow killer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's why this movie has... It doesn't do it for me. I mean, I think it's a great film. It just doesn't do it for me quite as much as it does for you. Because it's like, okay, you gave away the ghost right at the beginning. Now, again, this turns into a case of what people do and don't know that, right? Mm-hmm. So the family is obviously involved in hero worship of Uncle Charlie here.
Yeah.
Right? Like the bee's knees, he's the greatest thing on earth to these people, and they love him, and they're so happy, especially Charlie, his namesake, right? She's just enamored with him. She's fascinated. She's so thrilled that he's coming to visit. So what I really appreciated out of this more than anything is once she starts to come into the know of what's really going on here, then the relationship turns. And the way they interact, like their interactions from the beginning of the film right until the end, are really what sell this film for me more than anything else, Ryan.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean... No.
Credit to Wright, because she does a great job of standing up to Joseph Cotten and being his equal in this film. Yeah. Right, with acting.
For the record, I adored To Catch a Thief. For a long time, it was my favorite Hitchcock film too. So really? You are not alone. I don't know. We're going off topic here, and we can talk about To Catch a Thief later. But one of the things I will say about that movie is, while we're on the topic of Hitchcock, I just, again, sort of like The Third Man, I just love the vibe of that movie. Like, it's such a laid-back film, and such an easy movie, and then, obviously, it's on the chemistry of Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, which is just magical in that film.
You have these beautiful people in this beautiful locale with this beautiful jewelry and these
It's
beautiful
it's
costumes. And
it is the same reason that Soderbergh's Ocean's 11 is just such an entertaining watch. It's the reason
absolutely.
those type of Hollywood movies are just easy to watch because of the fact that they're all about watching pretty people do things that we would not necessarily do in real life.
Yes.
But going back to Shadow of a Doubt, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, let's face it. This is not the first time that Hitchcock's given the game away before the end in movies. I mean, he had done it before. He would do it later on in Rope. He would do it in Vertigo, very famously. So yeah, I mean, you're right. It's basically the question becomes how people learn the truth versus when
How
people,
the
as well
audience
as
learns
when
it.
they learn the truth. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is fascinating about this is young Charlie, uh, niece Charlie ultimately makes a choice here that is more that is more about protecting her family than it is her uncle, but you can kind of see it as a choice of still being somebody who appreciates her uncle as well by not making the choice to admit to everybody else this is who he was. This is who he really was. I mean, I think it is ultimately more about the family, but it's also something that really makes for an interesting choice in this finale. I mean, we've got 3 movies here where really interesting choices are made in the finales of these movies, and what does that mean for the characters? What does that mean for the relationships of other characters in the movie? And it's fascinating.
I think that it's I can make a bridge between Holly Martins and her in the way that Holly's out to protect, even though he knows that excuse me, even though he knows how terrible he's become aware of
Yeah,
how terrible Harry is, he doesn't want to be the one to sell him out,
yeah,
you know. And I think it's the same thing with young Charlie here, where she
mm,
says to himself, "Hey, listen, you know, I've worshipped this guy forever. I now have to take him off that pedestal that I put him on, but I don't want to be the one responsible for selling him out."
yeah,
And a big thing about this movie is it keeps going back and forth about how much Charlie's mother, the young Charlie's mother, Cotton's sister, would take it if she found all this out. That's the whole thing.
right,
And it's very, like, even at the end, like the end after he's been well, spoilers here, even after the end after he's been thrown, or he's fallen off the train, as young Charlie is talking to her paramour, the investigator there, about, you know, Charlie and what he was and all that. You hear this speech going on in the back. It's obviously a eulogy saying about what a great man Charlie Oakley was and how he
yeah,
has, you know, a great addition to the town. So you know that even though he's now no longer a threat to anybody, that there's still that level of worship for him in the
mm,
town because he donated money to a medical facility, apparently, a hospital. And then even though she's no longer part of it, you kind of get the thing that the mother still thinks that he died a hero.
yeah, yeah. No,
So it's
absolutely.
so it's just so weird because it's selling what he was to the family, even though she knows, and she's got to carry on with the secret, knowing what he really was, and that he was this Merry Widow killer. That money that he gave, that portion of the money that he gave away to the hospital there, is obviously from one of the widows he killed.
Yeah,
But what I really am fascinated with about Cotten is because you see him at the beginning and you know what he is, and he eludes the authorities and hops on the train, right? He shows
mm,
up and all of a sudden he's happy Uncle Charlie. Everyone's happy to see him.
yeah,
Things start to get weird when he doesn't want to take photographs. He doesn't want to take any photographs of him because he knows that he's aware that people are onto him here, and he
right,
has to be aware, make sure that he covers himself, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing about his, like, there's a scene at the dinner table after some of this has come out, and young Charlie has already been given a key to what her uncle is really, and he goes through this whole spiel about how these disgusting fat widowers with all this money sit and they gamble away the money and they pay the money for food, and they're just like swine. I believe he uses the word swine. And you get a key into what his real view of humanity is.
Oh yeah,
and again,
it's really troubling. It's really unnerving.
But it's the whole thing again. It's that dark side of the American dream. We get to Charlie's family, and the word normal keeps coming up. The cop says it, Charlie says it to young Charlie, but the whole idea is that these are just normal people.
Yeah.
And Charlie at one point says, I don't want to be normal. Like, I want to be something better than normal.
Yeah.
But the whole idea that this is your normal American town. This is your normal American family, right? If Charlie doesn't come home, nothing fascinating is ever going to happen to these people, right?
Right.
And there's this great scene in the library that keys that out, because she tries to get across the street and the stopping guard crosses her because she wants to check the papers today to see if there's anything about the Merry Widow killers. She gets to and she's crossing the street, sees all the lights are going out in the library, and she knocks on the door, and the librarian comes off, and the librarian is clearly pissed off at this point, right?
Yeah.
He's like, hey, listen, I can't let you in, right? And it's like, well, listen, I just need a minute or two to look at today's papers. And she's like, well, listen, if I let you in this one time, I'll have to do this 1,000 times for other people. It's like, okay, lady, how much traffic do you think you're going to get at 9 o'clock at night at your local library, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so insular and small town minded that this lady thinks that she's in like a prominent position in the world because she's the librarian. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But there's that whole idea of being normal. And when Harry gives that, well, not Harry, I'm sorry, I'm getting movies mixed up here. When Charlie gives that speech about the old widows and how they're disgusting and they waste money and they just jam food in their faces and they play pinochle, they're wasting all this money that's there. It really keys you into the abnormal side of American life.
Yeah.
And that darker edge to things. And I think that's where I really started to appreciate this movie, because that's Hitchcock. That's perfect Hitchcock saying, hey, listen, every one of my movies, like there's this small hotel in the middle of nowhere, the small woman working in a place who steals his money, and then there's these bloody murders coming out of what should be normal America,
Right.
And that's a theme throughout his thing, that these are just like for the most part, his characters, his protagonists are everyday people, right?
Yeah.
Living in quote unquote normal America. And then you have this whole dark underbelly. And when Cotten gives that speech, it's spot on perfect, Brian.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's fantastic.
But like you said, it's also disturbing, because this is the kind of quest that, number one, they do exist in the real world. And number two, these are the kind of things that Charlie's sister and his brother-in-law and his family probably never even consider, you know?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, we do very much get no, I mean, one of the things that is so interesting about the dynamics here is that the sister's family is very much middle class, and they don't necessarily have predominant prominent places in society, but they are respected in society. And I mean, he is talking about things that they wouldn't even necessarily ever think about, necessarily ever have on their minds, but the way he does it, it's so unnerving. I mean, it really does open it really, that's where the niece's possibilities of, well, what's going on here, really comes into play.
Well, and there's another scene in the bank. They go into the bank, and I believe that Cotton's going there to deposit this fortune that he's got, right?
Yeah.
And his brother-in-law is a banker, right? And he goes up to the window and he starts making jokes about the bank being held up, right? Mm-hmm. And the brother-in-law says, Charlie, you can't really say those types of things in a bank. And you can tell in that scene that Charlie has such a disdain for small town America that he's mocking it by just going, and he keeps leaning into this thing about the bank being robbed. And you can tell that his brother in law just starting to squirm, going, oh my God, I hope this doesn't come back to me. Like, I hope it doesn't, but I hope it doesn't,
Yeah.
poorly on me what my brother in law is saying, you know?
Right.
And I think it's fascinating. Like, you can just tell that Cotton's character disdains this small life, and he's got to put on this facade and pretend to be in love with it because he's got to hide out here for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And then once young Charlie realizes or has the suspicions about her uncle, there are some great scenes that play out. I love the bar scene between them where we do start to get more of a sense of, you know, the fact that it is going to be, how much is young Charlie going to push him on this, and how much danger that putting on her in. And I think that's a fascinating way that this story progresses.
And that scene is funny too because I'm like, how does this bar exist in this town? Like,
Yeah.
everything is beautiful. But that's showing you that even in this town, there are these dark little pockets that people probably don't talk about, you know?
Yeah, 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 exactly. I mean, so much of it is just based on the whole idea of like somebody who seems to do very good things and can be well loved by people. It can be a monster as well. I mean, we've certainly seen that over the years through many people in society. And yeah, I mean the ending, especially the way the ending plays out, seems very the ending feels very contrived in a Hitchcock suspense thriller way, and it ends very abruptly too. It seems like, but yeah, that scene at the very end where the choice is made to uh, cover up, for lack of a better term, Uncle Charlie's true nature is one that really, the fact that that's what we're left with is really just a fascinating choice on the part of the filmmakers. But like you said, it's kind of pointing to this idea of regular America and the dark underbelly underneath.
But it also keys into the idea that ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
If we don't know that these bad things exist, we can continue as a small town America and not be bothered by it, you know?
Yeah.
So instead of, wow, this guy murdered 3 women, tried to murder one of our own citizens, and he fell off a train, instead of that, we have a revered member of society. We'll look back on him fondly and miss him forever. And now we can go on with our normal lives.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, people in a town like that don't want to be challenged. They want to be normal, for the most part. They don't want abnormalities like, serial killers throwing women off trains.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes,
exactly.
I think that as a way to cap it off, I think that is 3 for 3 in brilliant films, 3 different directors, 3 very different roles for Joseph Cotten, all of which are stellar.
Yeah.
I think he shines in every one of these movies in different ways. And I think that if you wanted to encapsulate and say, why should we still be thinking about Joseph Cotten? Why should anybody watch Joseph Cotten movies? What was the big deal about him? I think if you watch these 3 films in the order that I suggested, that you have a perfect setup and a perfect explanation through his roles about why he should be more revered than I think he really is.
Yeah, I agree completely about that, and I appreciate you, Phil, for bringing this topic to the podcast. I mean, this was a topic that you wanted to explore, and I love the fact that we were able to explore it through the context of these 3 films. And you're absolutely right. Cotton is somebody who should be remembered for the tremendous work that he brought, as well as the tremendous range that he shows, especially in movies like these.
Absolutely. And of course, I want to thank you for not only entertaining me by, going along with our topic here, but having me on. I always love to join you on Sonic Cinema. The 3 or 4 times a year I'm here, I take it as a great honor. And it's always a joy to talk about great films and sometimes not so great films with you, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look forward. I know we've already talked about a couple of other discussions later in the year. I really am looking forward to continuing the discussion with you.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. It was a joy to be on Sonic Cinema again today.
I'd like to thank Phil once again for joining me on the podcast. It's always great to talk to him, and I look forward to talking to him more in the future this year. We've got some really interesting discussions to talk about, to bring to you, and I think there will be ones that that are going to be fun to listen to. And that's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Podcast. Thank you very much, as always, for subscribing, rate, and review whenever you listen to an episode that you enjoy. Share it as much as possible. If you can subscribe to the Patreon, that'd be great. But ultimately, the most important thing is that you continue to listen and read the work at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.